Hey everyone, Erin from the Impatient Gardener. I'm just sitting out here potting up a few Liatris bulbs. These came from Longfield Gardens and they're actually starting to sprout a little bit. And so I'm potting them up in these individual containers. I certainly could have kept these bulbs cool and dark and just planted them directly into the ground when it was time. But sometimes I find it easier to have plants to work with when I'm planting in a garden because it helps me space things out a little better. I'm just sort of visual that way. Interestingly enough, I had planted up a bag of these, probably about 2 weeks ago now, and they're doing really good. In fact, I'm going to show you what they look like right now. I'm just going to top these off. They want to be planted about 3 inches deep, so I'm going to top these off with a little bit of more potting mix. I will give them a little bit of water, and then I'll show you where they're going to go next. And I figured this would be a good opportunity to just update you on some things that we've already touched on in videos and just kind of give you an update of what's happening around here right now. So I just save my pots from year to year, and I love when I can snag these little carriers as well to keep them all in a line, which is really nice. Anyway, these are the Liatris that I planted up maybe 2 weeks ago, and look at how well they are doing. They just shot right up. I'm so happy with them. It's going to be so nice to have more mature plants to plant out. So as you can see, I've moved a lot of things out to the temporary greenhouse, and I was able to sort of step that process up a bit because the past 2 days I have added a small space heater out here. Now this is not where it sits when it's on. This is just out of the way so that when I water in here it doesn't get wet, because this is just your basic cheapy indoor space heater. What I've been doing is setting it up on these 2 blocks. I move those into the middle and I put it at a very low setting, and I've been keeping an eye on the temperature. I picked up this fairly inexpensive thermometer that has Bluetooth on it, so I can keep an eye on the temperature in here at night. And I'm trying to keep it at about 45 degrees in here. So far I've actually had to keep turning it down. It keeps staying up at more like 55 or so. But that's allowed me to bring out a lot more things. So let me just show you what's out here really quickly. So I've been showing you guys these sedums. This is just a plant that I saved last year, and I've just been dividing it. These are the onions. It's about time to get these onions planted out. I think I might make 1 more week before I plant those out. Also, I've got snapdragons out here. This is Echinacea pallida out here. That's the pale purple coneflower. This is quaking oat grass. And of course the sweet peas, which are looking absolutely fantastic. It's also getting close to time to plant those out too. We'll wait a week or possibly 2. We'll see what the weather does. It's been a little chilly here. But the other thing, and strawberries. And I have my the little strawberries that I started from seed. This is the Dahlias strawberry. That's a All-American Selection winner. So the other thing that I brought out right now is that I want to show you is little dahlias that have sprouted. So a lot of you have seen my dahlia video on how to start your dahlia tubers earlier for earlier blooms. And if not, I will link that below so you can check out that video if you want to. So I do that just so that I can get flowers a little bit earlier because we have such a short season here. If I lived in a zone like 7 or a warmer zone, we're in 5B here, I would probably skip that process and just plant them straight in the ground because there's a lot of extra work and time and frankly money because you need potting soil to do it. So it's not necessary to do that by any stretch of the imagination, but the next step after that video, which is where I pot them up, is I put them inside just upstairs in a warm part of the house. I barely water the pots and then I just wait for sprouts to come, and then as soon as I see sprouts like there are in this pot, as soon as I see those sprouts, I bring them outside into what is now the warm greenhouse. If it were cold in here and I didn't have this space in here at night, I might have to amend that plan a little bit and sort of come up with a situation where I'm bringing them out into a warm spot during the day and then in at night. But because it's warmer in here now at night, I'm able to do that. By bringing them out here, as soon as those sprout, I don't have to worry about hardening them off at any point, because the first time they see light, it's bright sunlight. And so when you're hardening plants off, you're worried about two things. You're worried about the amount of light and the temperature. Well, I can control the temperature in here a little bit, and when it comes time to plant them in the garden, by that point they'll basically be sitting outside the greenhouse or with the greenhouse open all the time, so it will be the same as being outside. But they never see any other kind of light other than the light of the sun, which is brighter than any kind of light you're going to be able to provide in your house. So that's why I bring them out as soon as they sprout. I bring them out. I just take the handful of them that have sprouted that day and bring them out. All of the ones that have sprouted so far are new tubers that I got this year, which is pretty common. Usually the new tubers I buy tend to sprout sooner than the ones that I have stored. So that's just par for the course. And then I just bring them in here and let them grow on in here. So that's what's happening in here. Why don't we head inside so I can show you what's happening on the inside. Well, there is no good way, given the lighting, to show you how my seed starting looks in the basement. But I will try to give you a close-up because there's, as you can see, lots more things growing inside. A lot of these things will stay in for a long time because things like basil, this is the Emerald Towers basil that I planted up in the seed starting video, will not appreciate any amount of cold, so they have to stay inside for a while. Some of these things, though, are ready to be potted on, and so I thought I'd show you the process of how I do that. So this is Strawberry Blonde Marigold, and you can tell that these are ready to move on because the roots are coming out the sides here, and so those could use a little bit more room. So you can also tell that there are 3 seedlings in here. So the first thing I do, and this is a good time to do, you can do it sooner than this too, is I take this down to 1. And rather than try to tease them out, which can disturb the roots of all of them, all I do is nip off the ones that I don't want. Generally speaking, you want to pick the strongest seedling in the bunch. And these two are pretty similar. I would say this one is maybe slightly better because it's a little bigger. So I'm just going to cut this one out. That's totally a judgment call. Then I'm just going to stick that, obviously, in another reused pot. And I just top it off. Now, I don't feel the need to fill up pots when I'm repotting things all the way to the top, like when you would buy an annual in the store, because I'm stingy with my potting mix. It's expensive and there is not a lot of it, and these plants are not going to be in here that long. They don't need a ton, most of them don't need a ton of root area. So I will water that in, and marigolds are pretty tough, so I will probably move those actually out to the now sort of semi-heated greenhouse as well. So I also want to show you the progress on the new garden. Now this is the garden that I talked to you about in the How to Design a Garden video. And progress here is slow but steady, I would say. To be honest with you, this is not what I find to be the fun part of gardening. So I've been working on this sort of interspersed with things that are a little bit more interesting to me. But you can see that we have this massive bridge built. This bridge is excessive for the little bit of creek that's running over, but I wanted this to actually be a place where at some point when the plants are growing up kind of around this, shielding this a little bit from the road, we could actually sit here if we wanted to, pull up a chair and sit here. Whether that happens or not, we'll see, because I find that gardeners are particularly optimistic when it comes to thinking that they're going to have a seat in their garden at any point. But it's nice to have this done, and it certainly makes it more convenient to work in this area. So that's a real bonus. So what I've been mostly working on here is just digging out the plants that I'm not gonna want here. So most of the ostrich ferns that were here have been repurposed and sent to a new home. That was very thankful to get them. There are still a few around. They are tough to dig up. So there are still a few around. And I'm sort of waiting for all these daffodils to bloom before I go disturbing them, because they are gonna need to probably be moved, or I might just sacrifice them. The other thing I've been dealing with is a lot of noxious weeds around here. Here you can see the biggest problem over here, which is this wild raspberry that's everywhere. I've actually made a pretty good dent in the population of these by pulling them out by hand, but as you can see, I have a ways to go, and that is really not a fun project, so I'm trying to take that like in 15-minute chunks and just try to crank off 15 minutes a day. So I want to show you this mess over here. You probably know that I am not a fan of landscape fabric in any way, shape, or form, but I did use some in this area because this was the place where I was growing out willow in order to use for, well, frankly, I wanted to create a fedge, which is a fence/hedge, but also have willow to use for other projects. And I've been growing that for a while. It grew really well. I've actually started moving those, and I have moved most of those willows to another spot. But now I'm left with pulling up this landscape fabric. And I wanted to show you, it's very hard to pull up because you might be able to tell, look at how much dirt has accumulated on top of this over the years. And do you see these weeds? These have all grown through the fabric. So landscape fabric is not what it's cracked up to be for the most part. Here's the other weed that is actually the biggest problem over here. Anytime you see this much of the same plant around, you can be pretty sure it's a weed. And in this case, it is an exceptionally noxious weed. This is creeping bellflower. And I let this get ahead of me in my garden, and it is a huge problem. Unfortunately, I have found only one way to make it go away, and that is herbicide. It spreads by terrible rhizomes. I have had no success managing it in any way, even smothering, without using herbicide first. So I'm waiting for a windless day, and I'm going to come over here and I'm going to very carefully apply herbicide to this, specifically to this weed. So in order to make this garden that I have planned over here, which is a very natural space full of a lot of native plants and plants that will be great for the insect population and just the environment in general, in order to make that all work, it's going to be important that I get a handle on that creeping bellflower. So although I don't like to use herbicides in my garden, in fact, I can't think of a single time I have used one with the exception of on this weed. It's something that I feel I have to do, and I think that in this case, the reward is worth that. So the next step for this garden is, as you can see, there is a lot of cleanup to do. Now I am starting to get plants for this garden within the next week. So we are on a bit of a clock here. After I get this area cleaned up, as well as I want to get it cleaned up, we are bringing in more soil to bring up the level of this garden and fill it in so it's not such a dip, which is why it appears that the bridge is so high, because that's all going to get filled in to the level of the height of that bridge. And I'll also be probably laying some cardboard down before I put down that new soil, just to help smother out anything else that might be running under there that I haven't caught yet. So that's the update on some of the projects here. I know some of you folks have been asking about that, so I want to just kind of give you an update. Nothing here earth-shattering, but progress continues. And I hope progress is continuing in your garden too.